With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning here on the AgNet News Hour. Now this week, since it is a holiday week, we are refeaturing some of my favorite interviews from the past few weeks. Don't forget to join us again on Monday, December 2nd for our very special news show featuring something that I'm very excited about. That is coming up on Monday, December 2nd. But for today, since it is Thanksgiving and we are resharing some of our favorite interviews, I thought I'd share this show featuring my husband, Rusty Halvorson. Coming on the show today, you've heard his voice quite a bit. In fact, every day you hear it here on the show. Mr. Rusty Halvorson.
I'm glad you said special because I would have been pretty perturbed had you not. Yes, thank you for having me on the show. You're
welcome. All right, so he's special to me. We'll just get this out of the way right at the top of Rusty Halvorson. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. We are married.
That's a fact. That's a fact, Jack. Since September of 2019.
Hey, good job remembering that.
Yep, you bet.
All right. So Rusty Halvorson is a farm broadcaster in North Dakota, and that is actually how we met. I was a farm broadcaster in California. He's a farm broadcaster from North Dakota. And like all couples, we met in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah, at Commodity Classic. And a Commodity Classic, for the listeners, a very large event that draws folks from around the nation. It is mostly a gathering of the nation's corn, soybean, wheat, and sorghum producers, such as the American Soybean Association, National Corn Growers Association, National Association of Wheat Growers, and National Sorghum Producers as well, NSP. And, we met in Phoenix, and then a few weeks later had met again in Washington, D.C., and another event for farm broadcasters, a leadership conference, and also what farm broadcasters call Washington Watch. That's where farm broadcasters will gather in Washington, D.C. in the spring to visit with not only their members of Congress, if they set up appointments and whatnot, but NAFB brings in various folks like leaders of the Senate and House Ag committees, and also we make a visit to USDA and talk to sometimes the secretary when we're lucky, and many undersecretaries. And it's a good event in Washington, D.C., and then kept in touch after that, and here we are in 2024.
That's right. We've kind of been through a lot in these last 9 years. Pandemics, various things. Yes.
Little this, little that. Yep.
All right. So, Rusty, of course, I know all about you, but let's tell my listeners a little bit about you. First off, if his voice is sounding familiar, that's because, yes, he is the person who does the intros for this show. So you hear him at the beginning of the show and the beginning of each segment.
Yes. I started in radio when I was fairly young. I was in my teens and got my start in radio because my dad, Lee, was a sports broadcaster for many years in North Dakota, and he's since retired, but he was a sports broadcaster in a little town called Devil's Lake, and then also worked at a radio station in Williston, North Dakota. That's in the northwestern part of the state, and your listeners might be familiar with the Bakken boom and all the oil development in North Dakota. That's the part of North Dakota I grew up in, and is a lot quieter back then. The oil boom happened after I'd come to Fargo, North Dakota, which is on the eastern side of the state, right next to Minnesota. And folks might be familiar with the movie or the TV show Fargo. A lot of similarities, but not everything. A lot less murder, for real, in Fargo, the actual Fargo. But, so I got my start in radio when I was a teenager. Thanks to my dad, I had an interest in radio. I went to North Dakota State University. Some of the listeners out there might be familiar with the NDSU Bison. We've got a little football team that's been very successful over the last 10 to 15 years. Where was I going with that?
You're going to college. What I like about your college story, though, I'm going to interrupt you here, is that they actually had to create a program for you because at that time, NDSU did not have an ag communicators degree program.
Yep, that's correct. They did not have a recognized ag communications program. And so my advisor, when I transferred to NDSU from Williston State College, which used to be UND Williston, University of North Dakota, Williston, I transferred to NDSU. And I explained my interests and what I like to do. I said I really like agriculture, and I've been working on the radio just as an announcer. I'd like to meld the two and become a farm broadcaster, like there are other farm broadcasters in the region. I didn't invent farm broadcasting by any means, but I wanted to try that, and they did not have an ag communications program. So my advisor suggested a general agriculture degree with a minor in mass communications, and it worked out well because with the general agriculture degree, I got a little bit of knowledge from several different departments at the university, a good base of knowledge to go with. And as most folks know, you learn a lot on the job, especially when it comes to radio and news in radio. And so that was a good start. So, yeah, proud of my time at NDSU and still in Fargo to this day.
And then right out of college, as you were graduating, you headed over to a radio station and said, hey, this is what I want to do?
Yep. When I was just prior to my graduation, I sought out the advice of an old radio friend of my dad's. His name was Lyle Romine, and Dad and Lyle worked in a little station, KDLR Radio in Devils Lake, North Dakota. They're both kind of from the area, and that's more in the north central part of North Dakota. And Lyle and Dad worked together back in the 70s and just briefly in the early 80s, where Lyle worked at KDLR. He was the program director, and Dad was the sports broadcaster. And so they would go and broadcast high school football and especially basketball games. Lots of basketball games for those guys. In North Dakota, Class B basketball is kind of what you'd see in the movie Hoosiers. Small towns, really proud of their basketball teams. That's kind of a Midwest kind of thing. I'm sure that's common in all parts of the country, but so a lot of basketball games together, lots of hours on the road, late nights driving, bad weather in the winters, bad roads, and so Lyle and Dad became really good friends. So anyway, fast forward to the 90s, and I went to Lyle because he was working at a radio network doing farm news and farm markets, the American Ag Network. Lyle had started it. It was called Ag America in the 1980s and kind of transformed over the years. And so I went to Lyle, and I just wanted career advice. I said, Lyle, this is my degree I got. I like radio, I like agriculture, and I'd like to do something in your line of work, and I'm willing to move. Do you know anybody that might be looking for a young kid out of college, or somewhere I should start? And just so happens that they kind of needed some help, so he hired me on, kind of on a trial basis. Let's see if it works out, and it did. Here we are, some 20 plus years later, almost 30 years later. So, yeah.
That's how the legend got started.
Well, I don't know if it's a legend, but yeah.
All right. So when we come back, we're going to talk about some agricultural things. There are a lot of similarities, believe it or not, between California and North Dakota when it comes to some agricultural issues. And we're going to talk about that when we come back. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. He's Rusty Halvorson, and we'll be right back. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. How does the use of humates contribute to water conservation and improved nutrient efficiency in farming systems?
It's a simple thing. Humates are I joke it's the caramel in the nut roll, but what it does, it helps these soil aggregates form colloids. And those colloids are little clusters of soil that have macropores and micropores. Those micropores are what's really doing the work for storing nutrients and water. Through capillary action, those micropores can hold more water. And so by increasing those soil aggregates and increasing your organic matter, you actually increase that soil's ability to hold water and hold nutrients, and therefore make a more efficient use of the nutrients and water applied.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the company, if that's okay.
Sure.
Live Earth, from what I understand, is celebrating 35 years in the industry. Tell us a little bit about how the company has evolved over those years.
Yeah, so it's interesting. 35 years ago, when we were promoting humates to do some of these things, such as nutrient use efficiency, at the time, fertilizers were very inexpensive, and some of these regenerative agriculture and soil building ideas were fairly nascent. They weren't embraced by mainstream agriculture and mostly encouraged by hippies and some of these environmentalists. So it's really changed in the last 35 years where nutrient use efficiency has become a big deal. And all of a sudden, these ideas that we were talking about the 80s that weren't very mainstream are quite in the main now. And I joke that we were cool long before we were cool. We just didn't know it. But the truth is, to be a leader and a visionary in this industry, it took 35 years for us to really realize that these products are needed and necessary for modern agriculture.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
All right, welcome back. We are talking with Rusty Halvorson. He is a farm broadcaster from North Dakota, and if that name sounds familiar, yes, he is also my husband. Yeah. All right, so Rusty, we want to talk about agriculture now.
Okay.
Now that we've gotten to know you a little bit, let's talk about ag in North Dakota. I teased our listeners on our way to the break saying that there were some similarities. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about one unfortunate similarity to start off with, and that is the wildfires that North Dakota has recently seen that has really affected cattle industry here. And it was in a cattle area of the state. So, that is a problem that is very familiar to Californians. We also have, of course, a lot of wildfire issues. But tell us about what happened in the recent months here in North Dakota.
Well, in early October, it was about October 3rd. The Dakotas, just to kind of set the stage, the Dakotas and Minnesota and much of the upper Midwest, northern plains, has been in a dry trend, especially since August, September. And so dry weather, if you look at the current U.S. drought monitor map, especially in western North Dakota, eastern Montana, western South Dakota, you will see some areas of very severe drought. So in early October, we had that dry weather, and we also had a wind event that was being forecast, and it was harvest season. And so if folks are a little bit familiar with corn harvest or soybean harvest, a lot of dust is generated when the combines go through those fields. And a lot of dry matter is out in those fields because of the dry weather and the crops drying down and whatnot. So we were anticipating what could be a very bad event with these high winds being forecast, the dry conditions, harvest activity underway, lots of folks moving in the countryside. And so the chance of a spark or wildfire or something to that effect, even wind and power lines, the stage was set for something bad to happen. And it did. In western areas of North Dakota, there were 2 to 3 very large fire complexes. And when it was all said and done, I believe we tallied well over 100,000 acres had burned in North Dakota, which in our neck of the woods, that's a lot. And there was livestock lost, there were homes lost, barns lost, outbuildings, grain bins, fencing, you name it. There is a lot of, due to these wildfires, a lot of lost equipment and livestock, and really affected people at a terrible time. And so there are different efforts underway. The North Dakota Stockmen's Association has started a large fund to help some of those people rebuild from the wildfires. Extension outreach from North Dakota State University and also from the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the NRCS, trying to help these folks rebuild from the fires. One thing that is a little different from North Dakota and California is the topography. The land in North Dakota is more conducive to fighting wildfires because in California you have so many mountainous areas, places that are hard to get to. North Dakota is a much flatter countryside. There are some areas in the west, such as the Badlands, that are very rugged where it's difficult to get to these fires on foot. You can attack them by aerial means, but that's one advantage in North Dakota is the topography helps lend itself a little bit better to fighting a wide-scale fire. So, yeah.
I have a lot of questions about the wildfires and about them in North Dakota because I don't recall seeing as much in North Dakota as we have had in California. But we'll talk about that when we get back. We do need to take a quick break. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. We are talking with Rusty Halvorson. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about agriculture in North Dakota. We'll talk more about the fires. And also I want to ask you about a very specialized crop as well that we grow quite a bit in California, not so much out in North Dakota. So,
Okay.
AgNet News Hour, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Welcome back. We are talking with North Dakota-based farm broadcaster Rusty Halvorson. And once again, he is my husband, in case you're wondering about the last names there. We are married.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And so we were talking about the fires in the eastern part of North Dakota.
Western.
Or, sorry, excuse me, in the western part of North Dakota.
Mostly western, some in southeastern North Dakota as well.
Yeah. So what I'm wondering is, I don't see a lot of fires out in North Dakota. You know, of course, me being a Californian, wildfires have become just a part of life, a horrible, horrible part of life.
Yep.
But it's something that we know, we have wildfire season.
Yep.
Not so much in North Dakota.
Not as common in North Dakota. And when we talk about those western North Dakota wildfires in early October, there is a full investigation that was launched to see what may have sparked some of these fires. And the early indications that I had seen, due to very, very high winds, we're talking 65 miles an hour to 80 mile an hour winds during this event, some power lines went down, and that's what sparked at least some of the larger wildfires. This time of year, with harvest and equipment moving around, sometimes a spark or heat from a combine or a grain truck can ignite something in a ditch or in a field. Those are other common causes of a wildfire, but these were caused by, from what we know, power lines. And so in North Dakota, again, topography is different from California. Vegetation is different. And I would say North Dakota, we have a tendency for wildfires in ditches, shelter belts, where there can be dry vegetation. But in cropping areas, it's not that common unless you do have a combine fire. If a combine gets very hot, when there's debris and chaff up inside all the gears and hot parts on that combine, you can have ignition, and those are a source of wildfires too, but not near anything that California has experienced over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk to you about some crops.
Okay.
There's not a lot of crops that California and North Dakota have in common, honestly, but there is one that we do much better. Actually, there are several that we do much better, but we'll start
That's
with
a
one.
debate for another day, but yes, continue.
Things are going to be rough around the dinner table.
No.
But let's talk about hemp.
Okay.
You and I recently ran into a hemp grower in North Dakota.
Yes, we did.
And had a good chat with him.
Yep.
But tell me about growing hemp in North Dakota.
Well, growing hemp in North Dakota has been a difficult process. A lot of learning there for the producers, and also still a lot of regulation, a lot of hoops to jump through. With the 2018 Farm Bill, industrial hemp was legalized for production, and North Dakota had a pilot project, I believe before then, but anywho, for hemp production in North Dakota, again, regulations are a thing, because a thing about North Dakota that folks in California have to know, there have been initiated ballot measures. There have been 3 unsuccessful attempts, I believe, probably over the last decade, where voters in North Dakota have rejected legalized cannabis, legalized marijuana. Minnesota is just coming on board with legalized marijuana. Montana is ahead of Minnesota in that game. South Dakota has approved marijuana use recreational. However, Kristi Noem, the governor, I believe, has overruled the will of the people, so that fight is still ongoing there. And in this 2024 general election, North Dakota voters once again rejected the idea of legalizing marijuana. So with that roadblock, growing CDB, hemp, a cousin to marijuana, is very difficult in North Dakota. And when we spoke to that grower, he was running into difficulty getting grant funding. He was running into difficulty qualifying for grant money, where he wanted to expand his operation, improve his hemp operation, and he was unable to do so because the folks that wrote the grant or were giving the grant did not want to be associated with hemp. Not marijuana, not cannabis, hemp. And so those kind of stigmas that still go along with CBD and hemp production is something that growers are trying to overcome in this neck of the woods. And so he had some very strong feelings about it.
You know, I think the marijuana as an agricultural crop, separate from hemp, But it's just such a fascinating topic to me. And part of it's because of our generation, too,
Yep.
having watched things change. The whole conversation around cannabis changed just
Yes.
in our lifetime to where now it's much more widely acceptable. And we are talking about it as an agricultural crop. Now, hemp used to be an agricultural crop 100 so years
Yep.
ago.
Yep.
Widely used for many, many things.
Very widely used.
Right. And now, with a return to wanting to use that as an agricultural crop, still facing the struggle simply because it is so closely related to cannabis.
Yeah, there's almost a taboo about it, which is unfortunate because it could be a very, very valuable crop for this part of the world and this neck of the woods, because the climate in North Dakota and the Canadian prairies, in the northern plains and Canadian prairies, hemp can grow quite well. And one of the obstacles that growers have had trying to adopt this crop and bring it back into production, one would be the regulations, and two, we've lost a lot of the wisdom and knowledge about how to grow and harvest this plant. We talked to this gentleman at the Pride of Dakota Showcase where he was displaying and selling his CBD products. And his first harvest, I believe he mentioned they had to take a chainsaw out there because they didn't have any specialized harvesting equipment. And I had heard similar stories from folks in South Dakota where the harvesting of the hemp crop was difficult because it was just so new. They didn't know how to do it. They took a hay baler. They got that bound up. That was an absolute mess. But another obstacle, Sabrina, is hemp processing, because this grower we spoke to, who lives in the southwestern corner of North Dakota, Dickinson, North Dakota, he had to haul his product to a processor, I believe, somewhere in South Dakota, several hours just to get his product to a processing point of sale. And so that's another obstacle that these growers in this part of the world are facing.
Yeah, it's a very interesting conversation. And you know what? We're going to continue the conversation. We do have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this, and we have several other agricultural topics to discuss as well. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. We're talking with Rusty Halvorson, and we will be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
We're talking today with Rusty Halvorson, who is a farm broadcaster from North Dakota. Also my husband, in case you're wondering about the names there. Now, we were talking about hemp when we went to the break.
Yep.
A very specialized crop. We were discussing how difficult it can be because it is so specialized. What are some other issues that growers in North Dakota are seeing?
Well, specifically as it relates to hemp.
Yeah.
Again, we mentioned before the break how some of the wisdom of how to produce the crop was lost. And I think some of the obstacles, some of the hoops that growers have had to jump through if they want to adopt this crop into their operation, usually on a very small scale. Guys aren't just going out and growing 30, 40, 50, 60 acres of it. They're trying small scale, see how it works, see if they can get a market somewhere they can deliver, and see if they can break even. That's the name of the game. Can we break even? Can we make a profit on this crop? And one of the obstacles has been getting in seed, hemp seed, very strictly regulated there. When North Dakota started its pilot program, you had to do a background check. I believe that's still in effect now. You have to do a background check. You have to be cleared to grow hemp, not marijuana, cannabis, just hemp, right. CDB. That's all we're talking about. Very difficult there, too. I believe in South Dakota. Again, I don't have the exact story in front of me. Somebody was hauling a load of their hemp down the road and got pulled over by the highway patrol and had difficulty convincing a state patrol trooper that this semi-full of open bales of what looked like marijuana wasn't marijuana. It was just hemp. It was just hemp. There's not a whole lot of semi-loads of marijuana cannabis just going down the road.
Right.
In North or South Dakota. That doesn't happen. So from looking at, I'm going to switch our topics here. So from looking at one crop that is heavily regulated. Now, let me tell you, California growers of anything know about regulations. Sure.
Like, we are the most regulated state in the nation, I would say, without a doubt. One of the industries that is very heavily regulated in California is the dairy industry. And there have been a number of dairy farmers who have been looking for other places to go. And North Dakota is one of those places. Not just and not by accident, I would say.
Yes.
The North Dakota Department of Agriculture has actually made a bit of a push to welcome California dairies that are done with all the regulations in California.
Yeah, North Dakota's a little bit late to the game on that. South Dakota had a more forward-thinking attitude when it came to the development of modern livestock operations in their state. And they developed what's known as the I-29 Dairy Corridor. I-29 is an interstate on the eastern side of South Dakota, very close to Minnesota, and they wanted to build up dairy barns and the dairy industry along that corridor because it made sense for processing, delivery points, that kind of thing. North Dakota was a little bit further behind because North Dakota has corporate farming laws, is what a ban. It's written into the state's constitution where a corporation cannot be an agricultural entity. Through recently passed legislation, those corporate farming laws, and this is a lot of adjectives and words and kind of speak when it comes to corporate or, factory farming and that kind of thing. But the corporate farming laws were relaxed a bit so that you could have family limited liability corporations. Family LLCs would be able to pursue some of these opportunities without bumping up against corporate farming laws in North Dakota. And so one dairy in particular, Riverview Dairy LLP, based in Morris, Minnesota, they have locations in Minnesota, South Dakota, and I believe in Arizona as well. They have proposed and are working through the permitting process on 2 new dairy locations on the eastern side of North Dakota in the Red River Valley, one near a town called Hillsboro and one near a town called Abercrombie, very small towns. And if these dairies would come into these areas and build their sites, it would mean a boost in the economic activity in these areas. And they would have families come in, albeit the workers on the dairies, by and large, are workers that come from Mexico legally on visa programs. And actually very, very good folks from all the conversations I've had with Riverview, good family folks, kids in school. They believe in the area. They're happy that they move here. Mm-hmm. And so it brings in new life to the community. These dairies have the potential to. It could also help revitalize the dairy industry in North Dakota through just inputs and crop use, and farmers would like that too. For North Dakota's dairy industry, I forget the exact herd numbers, but if these 2 dairies were built, it would double or triple the size of the dairy industry in North Dakota. Just from a 12,000 head dairy, just from a 24,000 head dairy, it would be phenomenal. But some folks are a little bit hesitant because they haven't had these large dairies in their backyard. And so there's discussions underway about these new neighbors and what opportunities or challenges they may bring to the Red River Valley.
Yeah, and watching some of those conversations, one of the things that keeps coming up is the smell. And I will have to say, there is a bit of a smell to dairies, but when you look at all of the economic benefits of having those dairies in those areas,
yes,
that's really something those people need to consider.
And I have visited one of these dairies personally, and they are
clean,
phenomenally clean.
Yeah,
phenomenally clean.
All right, we will continue this conversation talking about dairies, the differences between California and North Dakota when we get back. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Our guest today, Rusty Halvorson, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Welcome back. Once again, we are talking with Rusty Halvorson today, and in case you haven't heard in the rest of the show, he is my husband. And
hello.
We're talking farm broadcaster from North Dakota. We were talking about dairies, and so I just wanted to comment again on how clean the dairies were.
Yeah. So I had a tour of Riverview Dairy near Gary, Minnesota, the Walk-On Dairy. Walk-On's the name of the township. And Riverview names all its dairy locations after the township they're located in. But they invited me out there because folks had questions, and Riverview had a couple of open houses to visit with their new neighbors about their prospective plans and the permitting process. And if folks had questions about smell or odor, pollution, road traffic, water use, electricity, all those questions would be answered at these open houses. And they invited me out as a farm broadcaster because I have never been on site to a new dairy operation like this. Like, as I said, they don't exist in North Dakota on this scale. And so I went out there, and first off, the site is a very small footprint for, I believe, is 19,000 head of cows, what they had on the site. And for that number, the smells were minimal. In the barn, very large barn, big barn. And the cattle is very quiet. That's the first thing I noticed. It is very quiet and calm. The cows seem very content. The herd manager told me they essentially live like teenagers. They eat, they lay around a while, they get up for milking, and then they go eat and lay around some more. So great life. And it was in an outdoor type barn. It had air movement, freestanding barn, I guess you could call it, where there's air movement, exposure to the outside. But even in the dead of winter, when it gets very, very cold in the northern plains, we can easily have air temperatures in the minus 20s in some times of the year. The dead of winter, the herd manager said it would still be close to 50, 60 degrees inside the barn just from the heat of the animals and being enclosed somewhat. And the smell, pretty much non-existent. I mean, if you've been around a farm, farms have a little bit of a smell. That's right. Just what it is. But this wasn't by any means overpowering or making nauseous or anything like that. There were no flies. I think I saw 4 or 5 flies my entire trip. I did happen to let one into the vehicle, and he rode all the way back to Fargo with me. That was annoying. That was the worst part of the day, picking up one fly on the drive home.
So not a bad day.
Not a bad day at all.
All right. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about North Dakota in general. Actually, I want to talk about the governor.
Okay.
So the governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, somebody that you've talked with many times.
Yes.
Somebody that we've talked with many times.
Yes.
And his name has been thrown around in some circles as possibly getting a position in the new administration.
Yes, with the recent election, with President-elect Donald Trump beginning to form his new transition team and his new White House and cabinet and what that will look like, some folks may remember Doug Burgum being on the presidential stage at some of the Republican debates. He is the governor of North Dakota and has served his state very well through the pandemic and prior to the pandemic. But Doug the governor wanted to run for president and announced that in Fargo, and everybody was very excited. His campaign did not get the kind of traction he was hopeful for, although he had very positive reviews from some of the news outlets, some of the national media outlets. Doug Burgum's just a guy from North Dakota, just a good old kind of fella. And he did, I guess you would say, grab the attention of Donald Trump. And Governor Burgum has campaigned for Donald Trump on the campaign trail prior to the election. And there's been talk that perhaps Doug could get a cabinet position. He's been mentioned perhaps as a candidate for energy secretary because of North Dakota's very strong oil and gas industry. That would, that's in Doug's background. There's been a little bit of mention perhaps he could be tapped for agriculture secretary. I would not put him in the top 4 or 5 of that list for candidates. I would see it as a better chance of being an energy secretary. Right. But I've also seen some national media reports where President Trump, President-elect Trump, has talked about making Governor Burgum perhaps an energy czar within the White House. Now, what that looks like, I don't know. Right. But I think with so many things at this point in the game on the calendar and trying to predict Donald Trump and what he might do, I don't think anybody knows what will happen at this point.
Right, because it's still really, really early.
Very
and as
early.
We know, last time with his administration, he did not put people into cabinet positions or other positions kind of late.
Yeah, in fact, I believe President Trump's first term, Sonny Perdue of Georgia was nominated and accepted the job as Ag Secretary, and I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe he was named as Ag Secretary 2 days before the inauguration.
Right, it was just before the inauguration.
Yes, yes. And Secretary Perdue was a very good, we had a very good working relationship with Secretary Perdue. Very good working relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see how things kind of play out.
Yeah, it will be because between now and the inauguration, many changes could come, and excited to see who some of those folks will be that we will be working with.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take another quick break. A couple more questions for you when we get back. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Our guest today, Rusty Halvorson, and
Hello.
We'll be right back. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. How does the use of humates contribute to water conservation and improved nutrient efficiency in farming systems?
It's a simple thing. Humates are I joke it's the caramel in the nut roll, but what it does, it helps these soil aggregates form colloids, and those colloids are little clusters of soil that have macropores and micropores. Those micropores are what's really doing the work for storing nutrients and water. Through capillary action, those micropores can hold more water. And so by increasing those soil aggregates and increasing your organic matter, you actually increase that soil's ability to hold water and hold nutrients, and therefore make a more efficient use of the nutrients and water applied.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the company, if that's okay.
Sure.
And Live Earth, from what I understand, is celebrating 35 years in the industry. Tell us a little bit about how the company has evolved over those years.
Yeah, so it's interesting. 35 years ago, when we were promoting humates to do some of these things, such as nutrient use efficiency, at the time, fertilizers were very inexpensive, and some of these regenerative agriculture and soil building ideas were fairly nascent. They weren't embraced by mainstream agriculture and mostly encouraged by hippies and some of these environmentalists. So it's really changed in the last 35 years, where nutrient use efficiency has become a big deal. And all of a sudden, these ideas that we were talking about the 80s that weren't very mainstream are quite in the main now. And I joke that we were cool long before we were cool. We just didn't know it. But the truth is, to be a leader and a visionary in this industry, it took 35 years for us to really realize that these products are needed and necessary for modern agriculture.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Our guest today is Rusty Halvorson. He is, number one, my husband. Number two, a widely known farm broadcaster. I have been saying farm broadcaster in North Dakota, but that's actually kind of cheating you a little bit, and I don't want to do that because you, like me, are on a network, different networks, but so you are actually broadcasting in several states, kind of like I do. And what I love is you and I are both on in Michigan, and in fact, there are a couple towns in Michigan where we're both on. But on competing stations. So we get to be competitors with each other.
We also share the airwaves in Wisconsin. And as you said, folks may recognize my voice for some of the work that I've done for your network as well.
That's right. You're on my network as well. So you're on in California.
Yeah, but I've never kept count, but I think over the years my programs, my voice have been well over 4 dozen radio stations, which isn't much in the grand scheme of things, but
That's, I mean, when you're talking about coverage-wise.
Yep. In my prior experience for Ag America, American Ag Network, and then in my current job, and then your network, wide reach. So, yes, I've been heard. Yeah.
I think that's really, what I really love is that most places around the nation, if you turn on the radio, you're going to hear a Halvorson.
Yeah, there's a pretty good chance of it. Yep.
Yeah, so you've covered North Dakota for quite some time. You've covered the upper Midwest. You've got some California knowledge, a little Southeast knowledge as well.
Washington, D.C. knowledge.
Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Has agriculture surprised you at all?
Well, I tell you what, yes, it has. When I began in farm broadcasting in the late 1990s, we were just on the cutting edge of genetically modified crops. We were just on the cutting edge of many things like xenotransplantation using, for example, a liver from perhaps a pig to be transplanted into a human. Those were very new ideas when I started farm broadcasting, and they're, now you see headlines lately, here some 20, nearly 30 years later, and some of these things are day-to-day, everyday kind of things, especially when it comes to gene editing in crops. I think the new CRISPR technology is very exciting. CRISPR technology for gene editing is kind of like going into the DNA of an existing plant and using kind of a scissors to take out, modify that DNA, and I'm getting into an area that's way in the weeds beyond my knowledge, but CRISPR technology is very exciting, not just for crops, but also for human health applications and medical applications, so that's really exciting stuff there, I guess. But agriculture has surprised me in just the we're getting so modern and so I'm searching for the word, Sabrina. So modern, so tech savvy. If we want to keep feeding the world, we've got to do more with less, and we're trying to do that, and we are doing that.
Yeah, we are. The technology is just amazing, and watching how things are growing and changing, and the things that we're able to do now.
Yeah. On the flip side of that coin, for the growers out there, this technology also is very expensive to use. When you talk about seed prices and input costs these days, those margins for a lot of the producers out there are very, very tight. And so when we talk about pesticide use or we talk about things like that, farmers are very conscious about the bottom line. They're not out there exhibiting wasteful behavior. They're trying to do the right thing for the land, and they want to keep that land in their family if they can. Sustainability is a way of life. It's a buzzword these days, but ever since folks started farming in the Dakotas, I think a common theme is I want to leave this in better shape for the next generation and my family to take care of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's that way for farmers just around the nation. Mm-hmm. Farmers are always looking to the future. And as we wrap up today, Rusty, what are some things that you're looking for the future? For the future?
Yeah. Personal or professional?
Either one.
Oh, boy.
Don't get too personal.
Okay, fair. For professional life, I would like to take another visit. I'd like to revisit the White House. I've been in the White House press room once. I have not had a White House tour, so I'd like to see beyond the press room. The press room was pretty neat. Yeah. I was there during President Trump's first term when Sean Spicer was the communications for the White House. Fun times. If you need something to report on, there is always something new coming out of the White House every doggone day back then. Personally, I would like to see the Minnesota Vikings go to the Super Bowl, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
All right. Good luck with that.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Thank you so much for being a guest on the show today, Rusty.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't forget, Monday, December 2nd, we have a brand new show for you with an exciting announcement. That's our show for today. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. He's Rusty Halvorson. From our family to yours, have a happy Thanksgiving.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.